Okay, this is the second video looking at the rules of the Great Campaigns of the American Civil War. I'm going to concentrate on the action cycle, which is where all your fighting, general activities and movement, etc. takes place, which is the bulk of the game when it gets going, and there's quite a few units in place, so take most of your time. I did forget the attachment phase 8 that comes before the action cycle, but that's just where you can temporarily attach units to other formations. I'm not even going to look at that unless I decide to do that. First part of the action cycle is your initiative roll. Now each side rolls 2 dice, and you want to try and win your initiative roll, because that means one of your units can then be activated. Now, in the event of a draw, in this particular scenario, and most of them until the later war, maybe even the original first conflict at Bull Run, the Confederate, if there's a draw, the Confederate wins it. We've got Union command paralysis in place here, so it's a -1 for their throw. So let's just roll the dice. We have a draw, but Union get -1, so the Confederates gain the initiative for the start of this turn. Right, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a leader activation on Ewell. Now, leaders are the units with the picture on them. They've got 2 numbers underneath the formation, so this is the 2nd Corps, the Army of North Virginia. The first number is the tactical value, which is used in combat. We'll discuss that when we get to combat. And the second number is the command radius or command points. So that means that he can activate units. If you're going to activate a leader, you can activate his stack and all other units that are subordinate to it, as long as they're within the command range. The little green wooden marker there is just to tell me there's a special rule for this unit that gives them a +2 to their dice roll, but because I'm making a leader activation, I'd get +2 anyway, so that's not going to be in effect here. But for example, if Johnson moved, now normally a Confederate subordinate commander would get a +1 to his movement roll, which I'll show you in a minute, but in this case he'd get +2. But if you're activating a leader, you automatically get +2 to any formations that move. So let's roll for this. So Confederates, I get a 2. Because I've got a leader activation, that becomes 4. That means I have 4 movement points to move these units. First thing you do when you've activated a unit and you're about to move it is you put fatigue against it. So both these units are going to pick up a fatigue level of 1. There are 4 levels of fatigue, which shows you how exhausted your troops are. You need to keep your fatigue levels as low as possible. You don't, because units become less and less useful the more fatigued they become, and they become restricted in what they can actually do. So the 4 levels, first 2 levels are probably acceptable, but levels 3 and 4 you start getting serious problems. Okay, so we need to make a movement of 4 for each of these unit stacks. Okay, units like Johnson here are what they call military units. I know I called it subordinate there before, but you shouldn't have done, because there is a special time unit called a subordinate. Now, what we do there, these two, they have two values on them. There's a 3, which is a tactical value, and a 7, which is your artillery value. You've got a NATO symbol, which is the crossed red thing, shows you that's infantry. The red coloration shows that it's actually part of the 2nd Corps, so it's easy to identify which units are subordinate to which commanders. Underneath the military unit are your troop counters, and that shows that I've got 12 strength points of troops attached to this military unit. The org at the top says they're organised. If they become disorganised, they have less combat strength. So if you turn them over, you can see the disorganised side. So in that case, you can see it's got 8 and 12. The right hand side tells you there's 12 strength points of infantry there, but it's only got 8 combat points because it's disorganised. Needless to say, you don't want your units to become disorganised. Other types of military unit, you have cavalry. There's cavalry unit there. You see the NATO symbol, yellow symbol with a single bar across it. That is cavalry. There are some artillery units, but I won't show you them at the moment. They're over in those Army of the Potomac stacks. Okay, I will then move these units 4 hexes. So if you move along these little roads, the black lines, that only costs 1 movement point, regardless of the terrain it goes through. You know, you need to stick to the roads or the pikes, which are the solid black lines below. Otherwise, it gets very difficult to move units around. Even the movement in hexes for a clear hex is 3 points, so you don't want to be moving off the roads. Luckily, there are a huge number of roads in this area of Pennsylvania, Maryland. In fact, virtually every hex has a road on it. Okay, at this point I have moved. Johnson moved 4, and you will only move 3, because to move into a hex where there's already friendly units, there's a penalty in movement points, and the larger the force in the hex you're moving into, the bigger the movement points penalty, and Ewell hasn't got enough movement points to enter Johnson's hex. He'd only got 1 left at this point. Okay, that'll do for the moment. We'll get on to a bit more about fatigue and stuff as we go into the next side.